Good afternoon, friends. Good evening. We are moving on into that early winter evening situation. And I'm here at home, where I often am, and feeling the spirit contact that I spoke of or hinted at on Facebook the other day is about to happen. It has been happening for a while, and feeling the man's presence, L.Cohen, as he seems to want to be called at the moment, sincerely L.Cohen, as he says in that song, the famous blue song. And I've been reading the second volume of Michael Posner's oral biography with the opinions and memories of many who knew and loved him in every way possible, I would say. And been feeling the man's presence, the spirit's presence. And he said to me telepathically, of course, just a few moments ago, I am ready, Your Honor. And I said, why do you call me that, Your Honor? And he said, because you're judging me. As you read this book, you are judging me. And I felt like, maybe not quite that harsh. I felt like more like I was reacting to his outrageously bohemian life, both before being a star and while he was a star. Of course, that's one aspect. There's much generosity of the heart and the pocketbook by L.Cohen. He helped so many people, I can hardly believe it. It's astonishing. Money, money, money. A very kind man. And perhaps he felt he had too much and it was his job to spread it around. And he's saying, yes, it was my job to spread it around. It's the job of every man to spread the wealth around. I was merely being an example. So, L.Cohen, if it seems like I'm judging you, it's partly because I have a very, calm, predictable, bourgeois life without the myriad of lusts that you threw yourself into. And I cannot be anything but astonished by the level of lust and desire and ambition that you exposed yourself to in this incarnation. It's endlessly astonishing to me. And he says, because you lead a quiet, sedentary life? And I said, well, yes, perhaps. You're not the only artist to live that kind of a life. But the exposés of people's opinions and memories, both men and women, of many races, reveal this over and over again. And certainly your work does too. I see the more and more references to actual situations in your life that I wouldn't have gotten if I hadn't read these 2 volumes of Posner's book, and I will likely read the third. In fact, I can't see how I would possibly miss it. So this is why you call me Your Honor? Well, I'm partly joking, he says. And I should say, L.Cohen, that I had impressions, psychic impressions, before we sort of started speaking here, that you're reached a point in your eternal life after your transition 4 or 5 years ago that you can travel about with, how shall I say, ease and grace. And you are visiting many, well, some, if not many, people who are reading Posner's book right now. And you are observing their thoughts and reactions, mine included. And he agrees. This is a game with great insights for him. He gets to see how people react over and above the glamour and charisma that he employed to pull them into his vortex of power and, well, let's face it, love. And he's not pulling anyone into his vortex now, I imagine. And he says, no, I'm not. I'm not exercising that power. Although in this world, in this spirit plane that I have become quite settled in, one can do that. Glamour still can be a draw. And people, unless I disguise myself, which of course is much easier with the power of thought in spirit than it was in that world where fashion and glasses and hats would work sometimes. And I said, oh, what about those gloomy moods? I got the feeling they would work sometimes too. You'd get all gloomy and melancholy and sit in a corner and people would avoid you. And he's saying, oh, well, they were real. But yes, I could pull them into my vicinity and wear them like a cloak. And it would give me a certain amount of peace in a crowded place. And I was as much a victim of my moods and my energy levels as anyone. I could be, as you've read, the life and soul of the party, the head-standing clown, as well as the melancholy romantic poet, feeling his inner loneliness. Yes, I have noticed all these things, L.Cohen, and I'm thinking, knowing what I know about the spirit world after 20, 30 years of exploration and psychic mediumship, how easy it is to, how shall we say, travel. And you must love that. No getting on planes, no waiting for buses, no tipping taxi drivers. And he's saying, well, I actually rather like tipping taxi drivers. Human contact with strangers is a wonderful, enlivening, ennobling activity. And, well, I said, yes, it is. But isn't it fun to go from astral plane Greece to astral plane Los Angeles and astral plane Montreal? Astral plane Swiss Alps? Oh, yes, it is. And I have developed quite a taste for that. And L.Cohen, I'm getting the feeling that you also, as I've noted with your contemporary David Bowie, the ability to split yourself into more than one L.Cohen and visit more than one place and human being, physical human being, at a time. Indeed it is, he says. And I have found that my ability to detach, as in, let go of an attachment to the persona of L.Cohen and just become a malleable spirit, making himself into almost anything, is the way to do it. And since discovering that, I have celebrated the many faces of my spirit as I move around, and the many reactions that I can evoke in those I visit. This is a liberation, isn't it, L.Cohen? This moving away from the earthbound persona, not being the melancholy poet, not being the Greek folk singer, not being the Montreal Jew, not being any number of beings that people had stamped you with in your life here. It is. And I certainly recommend it for any of you who wish to try it on for size. Let go of who you are. Disappear from the tribe and the family and become a stranger. L.Cohen at this point reminds me of a short poem in the energy of slaves where you bought a man his dinner in Morocco, and was it something about eating it without looking at you in the eye? Yes. I really enjoyed the energy of slaves, Leonard. As I'm enjoying this single malt, but I have a feeling you prefer brandy. Oh, he said I would drink almost anything that was enlivening in those days. Do you feel the voices in the Tower of Song calling to you now that you're more of a free spirit? Endlessly, he says. Endlessly. Things are freer here. Perceptions are wider here. Deeper, wider, more all-encompassing. So I'm assuming Hank Williams isn't the only one that you hear. And no, he is not. There are many others. From many eras and cultures, I'm asking? Oh, yes, indeed. Oh, yes, indeed. The symphony of song. I immerse myself in it every chance I get. And all your lovers, Leonard, how do you establish privacy from all that desire, which I'm sure must still be active in that world? Well, one can indulge and one can abscond. One can hide. I can look like a decrepit old man. I can look like a teenage chess champion nerd. I can look like a not very attractive middle-aged woman. I can look like any number of things, beings, attitudes. So I'm saying, yes, I understand that. As I've practiced the art of soul rescue, which you may already know about, I'm not sure. That's where somebody here on earth meditates and projects into the lower realms, the hell realms, and attempts to, assist confused and fearful and angry souls who do not know what to do with their lot, shall we say. And in doing so, I can be any number of appearances and cultural representations in order to make that soul comfortable. So, are you doing that? I have been told of such activity, and I have practiced a little bit of that. There are many who need assistance, even if they don't know it. And I drop by here, there, and everywhere because I find that there is no exhaustion of energy. One can do and act in this way without becoming, an old party balloon empty on the floor next to the glasses and spilled drinks. One can do this. So how would you advise me, L.Cohen, not to judge you? Just absorb the details of the life that I have lived and has been given to you just as information, not as a defense lawyer's argument. I like that, L.Cohen. I like that. Very good. My bourgeois shock at your endless, I don't know, being led about like a trained monkey by your desires is astonishing to me. Although, obviously, when you alleviate that with much compassionate, merciful, and loving activity to those who would come into your orbit, that is undeniable. So would you say I've achieved a balance of good and bad traits? And I'd say, yes, I would say you have. You did then, I think, and you're probably even better at it now. And I can't imagine, and maybe that's my lack of anyone reading your book and not being overwhelmed by the chaotic tumult of your experience. This endless, obviously as a musician, there's a fair bit of touring and making albums and composing and interacting with your colleagues, your musical colleagues. But then all the other stuff, my goodness. And he's saying, well, a good part of that is just a man enjoying his life, enjoying the richness of his life and what it can offer if one does not get tied down. And I'm reacting by saying, yes, I can understand your unwillingness to be tied down. Endless movement, endless searching for the great cornucopia of activity. This from me, who has in the last 45 years has lived in only two places, an apartment and then a house. Ah, but you have sought the magical yourself, have you not? I have seen into your memories and imaginations. You do a lot from that home base. And, well, yes, I do. I do. It's the home base that is the rather dull life. What I do when asleep and meditating and is quite remarkable. And I often offer to help people, but I get the feeling there's not much I can do to help you. You seem to have found your balance, found your stability from which you can adventure in any direction without losing that stability. I seem to have accomplished that, but with a lot of good help and advice from those who would see themselves as guides. I see. Well, as I say, as I feel you out psychically, energetically, if you like, I do not see much in the way of lack, where I might be able to say, well, have you tried this, and what about that? You seem well able to cope with the richness of life and spirit. I'm assuming you've attended sessions and club gigs and concerts by musicians that passed on before you. And he's saying, oh yes, I have. I've played with some too. Although, you know, that drony voice is not up to harmonizing with some of the great singers of the past. And composers, I'm adding, and yes, he's he's listened to many, and the cultural life here is very rich and rewarding. Almost anyone that you can imagine is playing here in any genre. All you have to do is look and feel attracted, and you can be there. Would you have messages that you would like me to communicate through me to anyone or anybody? He's saying, other than a general benediction of gratefulness and thanks, as it were, to all those who supported my journey, both musical and existential. I now realize I couldn't have done half of what I did without the support of those who loved me. And so whoever may watch this or hear of it, thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm asking him now about the whole notion of God, and has he approached that one? And he's saying there is a God in places of worship, places of devotion, churches, temples, synagogues. There is also an emptiness that can be embraced in meditation, an even greater emptiness than I experienced on earth. And sometimes I think that emptiness is God. And when I am there, I cannot ask for anything. Partly because it seems, not a smart move. And B, because I have nothing that I wish for. I said, "Oh, what about forgiveness?" And he laughs. Yeah, maybe I've still got a bit of an urge for that. But one forgives oneself, he's suggesting, and I'm agreeing. Yes, you don't get forgiveness or redemption from a deity. You give it to yourself. Pretty much like anything else. At least that's my opinion. But he's adding, for those who need the deity that appears in devotion, whatever the costume and cultural baggage, let them continue to have that opportunity and that benediction. Let them feel loved and accepted by that deity. So I'm asking, is that stages on our journey then? Those who need prophets and deities, and those who feel that they've graduated from that into the great void of knowingness and understanding, the white light of emptiness, where all is possible and nothing can be achieved. He congratulates me on my formulation. And I say, well, that's high praise coming from someone such as yourself, who could formulate many beautiful turns of phrase to describe those mystical states. He is also reminding me to convey his gracious thanks to the editor and author Michael Posner for putting so much effort into making this trilogy as encyclopedic as possible. Others would have been satisfied with less, and you were not. And for that, I give thanks. I'm saying to L.Cohen, a couple of the books, others as well as Michael Posner's, have given me a rough idea of how much recorded material was not issued in your day. And I'm very pleased to hear about that. I'm recalling a description of a reading of Book of Mercy accompanied by a string quartet. And I'm very keen to hear that someday. As am I, he says. And I'm saying, given the way the recording industry works, after they have sold as many copies of your original CDs and albums, they will move on to that. They will move on to the unreleased stuff. That seems to be what happens with almost everybody. I tell him I'm very... the bootleg tapes of his early radio performances for BBC around 69. I'd love to hear those. A good production of that. Great sort of feeling in those early recordings. Great feeling. And he's now giving me that image that is so familiar with the later DVDs like Live in London, where he's taking the hat off and bowing. And that seems to be his gesture for the moment. Maybe not a final gesture, but one in which he wants to communicate that feeling. So, thank you, L.Cohen. And I will continue to treasure your cultural contribution, as will many others. He gives that gesture again. And I thank him for his persistence. He has been coming around a few times before I was able to execute this particular interview. To tell the truth, I feel like he's interviewing me. So, with greetings from L.Cohen and G. Finn, I will bid farewell to you, my friends, some of you who have followed these spirit contacts for years, and others who may be fresh to the experience. It's all about communication. Normalizing relationship between the planes. So long, friends.